Hey guys, welcome to Lauren.live, the spirituality, health, and lifestyle podcast. I've got Sheila V with me today. Hi, Sheila.
Hello, Lauren. It's such a pleasure to be here.
I love it. Nice to meet you. And you know what's so cool is Sheila is coming from Australia with us today. So we're on the opposite sides of the world since I'm in the Seattle area. That's really fun to connect with you. So thank you for the morning time. What time is it there?
It is 9 a.m. We just had daylight saving, so it's not too early, Lauren.
Okay, not too bad, not too bad. It's like 3 p.m. here, so cool. All right. Well, you guys, we are in for a special treat today because Sheila V has so much going on. She has so much to offer this world. Her wonderful spiritual side and her, she's a spiritual and business mentor. She's an author. She wrote the book Brave, and she has an awakening intuition class. She'll go into all of this, but I don't even know where to start with you. First, I would love you to explain just who you are, your spiritual background, and then we can move kind of into where that fits in with the business world, the corporate world. We were just talking about how a lot of times those things don't necessarily mix together. So how can we talk to our coworkers or improve our careers in the spiritual realm? I would love to talk about that too.
Yeah, I love these questions, Lauren. So I'm a psychic medium, and I had an awakening to these abilities about 7 years ago. And I spent 20 years prior to that in the corporate world. Okay. And I climbed the corporate ranks. I got a scholarship to university. I became a chartered accountant. I did an MBA, and I left the corporate world as a finance director in a big publishing house in Australia. And during my spiritual awakening, it became really confusing because I didn't know how to make sense of my old life and my old world, yet this new world had opened up that made so much sense to me but was so foreign. And I didn't know how to reconcile the two different types of worlds. And I think there are so many people now, Lauren, having spiritual awakenings. And that's why I feel so passionate talking and speaking about this. And I got called to write a book called Brave, Courageously Live Your Truth, because this book is about being brave in the smaller sense to own who you are, what your spiritual gifts are, what your spiritual nature is, and be brave and talk about it. So after I had my awakening, I spent 3 years part-time working as a psychic medium, which we all think, and a lot of people think that's weird. And I, for a long time, thought that was weird too, right? And then I trained at the Arthur Findlay College. I found a lot of spiritual teachers. I did a load of workshops to really school myself up in this whole new world. And Lauren, you could probably relate to this. It was a calling. Like in my heart, I was like, I think I'm meant to change my life and do this whole new thing. Yet I just finished my MBA, and I was like, but I thought I was going to be a CEO. I thought I was going to have this big important role with this big salary. And I spent years nervous, in frustration, anxiety ridden, thinking I don't know how to make sense of both the worlds. So now I mentor and coach women and men into their spiritual business, also how to use their intuition, which is my Awakening Intuition course. And I wrote a book, and the book is really, before COVID, I spent a whole year in a self-imposed lockdown to write my book. So, I just felt really passionate about helping women through the awakening process.
Yeah. Whoa. That's a lot. We have so much to talk about. This is awesome. I love your energy. Okay. Well, one thing I want to ask is, since you kind of just mentioned how you realized you were psychic, like how did you even realize you had these gifts? Was this something you noticed throughout your life, or did it just hit you kind of in your adulthood?
I had experiences as a child, and many of my students have like recollection of memories that they can't make sense of. So I definitely had intuitive experiences as a child. There's a few ways people find themselves understanding if they're psychic. So I definitely had a sighting of a ghost or a paranormal experience as a child. I also had trauma as a child, and a lot of my students and clients have had real hardship or one difficult thing they've had to overcome as a child. So trauma can sometimes be the space that opens up us to higher dimensions, higher energies, because on some level we're going to leave the body. The consciousness doesn't want to be here in this third dimension. So that's another kind of signpost that when you later have strong intuitive hits, you've had a difficult childhood. It's because you've trained yourself to leave and go to the higher planes. And another reason that I find common is you might have had trauma later in life. So when I studied at the Arthur Findlay College, there were a lot of women there had had sudden death of their partner or a child or someone very close around them. And that trauma later in life can catalyze the awakening to your psychic abilities. So that's what can catalyze it. I had this calling to learn tarot and I loved astrology. And so I was drawn to study all these metaphysical modalities, and I didn't know why. Like, a lot of the answer to our calling is in our passion, right? And then I did an intuitive workshop one day, and the teacher guided me through these exercises. And the lady I was reading for, I was very clear. I could see her child had disability. I could see a lot of challenges in her life. And I got a downloaded message to give this lady. I said, your child's going to ride a bike one day. I'm being told that's important that you know that. And this lady started to cry. And it was my first awakening that I had an ability and I could help people with it. Mm-hmm. The helping people with it was where it became profound. And so it was in a workshop. So that's why I love running workshops myself and encouraging my students to go to workshops, because generally a teacher will hold you in that early awakening stage.
Wow. Okay. So you had little things come and go as a childhood, but in that workshop is really when you realize, like, I have something here that I can use to help others.
Definitely. It's generally a workshop and that's why I'm so passionate about the space early on and holding a space where students they've got the ability. Because if not, you spend a long time thinking, am I, aren't I? Sure. I don't believe this. You love your corporate job. Like, you can stay stuck for a while until someone goes, you've got an ability and you've got to use it.
Okay. Do you also think people could maybe get help with mediums or psychics as well, though?
Oh, you mean in terms of training in it?
Yeah, or like finding out if you have, intuitive gifts or, higher self or anything like that. Like, is that also somewhere that you could go to, get some support?
100%. I think I went to psychic and mediums for such a long time, for like 15 years. And they all said, you've got the ability. And I'm like, oh, I don't know. Yeah. So a lot of psychics and mediums know when their clients have abilities. And we're in the space now where the consciousness of the planet is so high. A lot of psychics are reading that for clients, going, you've got the ability. So we can see it in the auric field. And if you read the timelines, you can see that there's an opening that's about to happen. Mm-hmm. So quite often you might be called to a psychic medium as well, because you're about to have the awakening.
Got it. Yeah, I feel like I've been going to mediums like crazy. I'm in that stage, I think, of my awakening where I'm just like, I can't get enough. And people talking to people like you, that's why I'm doing this podcast. And I'm asking this kind of for myself, but also for others listening. If you've been feeling like, I'm interested in this stuff, but they've been telling me, we think that you have this ability, but myself, I just haven't had that either breakthrough or I feel a little bit blocked. Like, what are a few tips that you could give to people like me who are really attracted to this kind of stuff? Listening to intuition, getting in touch with guides. Like, what are a few things besides like a workshop or a medium?
Yeah, so I love these questions, Lauren, because they're really common at the beginning of the awakening process. I hear the word blocked a lot. I want to connect to the guides. So just to help you, the fact that you want to connect to your guides is a sign that your light body, your auric field can hold enough light that you want to start connecting to the guides. The guides have been around you since you were born, since conception, right? And everyone's like, do I have guides? I'm like, 100%, because you've got a soul contract you're here to do. And the awakening tends to happen when we're like, there's a contract. There's something I'm meant to do with my life that's quite important. Generally, it has a big service element, service to humanity. And that's when the guides are coming closer and closer, and your aura holding enough light, you can communicate with them, because the guides have very high energy, and in this human realm, it's pretty dense. So you've obviously done enough work to hold enough light. The crown chakra must be open. You must have a pretty, developed crown. And I always say to my students, it's like a satellite dish on top of your head. And suddenly you're like trying to tune into the frequency, right? So my counsel for you and to anyone listening to this podcast is start to get in touch with your spirit guides, and daily. Do a really beautiful guided spirit guide meditation, right? That will take you to meet your guides. And I have one that I teach my students, and they love it. They've been doing it every day. I've run this course several times now. And the consistent feedback I get is every time they do it, the connection to the guides gets stronger. They meet more guides. the information they're getting through their psychic senses is starting to get stronger, and they're starting to believe in their abilities more and more. And that's the most exciting thing. So connected to the guides every morning and night at least, and starting to journal or channel what's coming through.
Interesting.
Kind of like a discipline. It's like a muscle you have to build.
Okay. And just for some people that may not understand, they're like guides. That could be anything. Other terminology too. Guardian angels, guides that are, looking out for us. They can't necessarily interfere a lot of the time, but, physically, they're not going to do something for you, but they're around us, loving us, supporting us, right? What, some of them can be past ancestors potentially, or I know I've been into the understanding that it could also be, angels that are helping everyone, like Archangel Michael or Gabriel, right? So there are many different kinds. Is that correct?
There are many different kinds of guides. You are born with a master guide, a primary guide to help you through evolving your own contract with what you're here to do.
Okay.
So there's one master guide that's keeping you on track. And that's why some big changes might happen in your life. And you're like, why is this happening? Your master guide's there to help you navigate through the big stuff in your life. I do see as a medium when I do readings for clients, ancestor guides around. Okay. I find ancestor guides are there for two reasons: to help you amplify your gifts given to you by your family line. You might have the gifts of singing or talent or speaking or writing, or so many different ways talents can come through, right? The other thing is to break family patterns that don't serve us. And so a lot of ancestors will be around you to break, especially for us women, the patterns of self-sacrifice, people-pleasing, perfectionism, not feeling good enough. So you'll have a lot of ancestors to help you with that. And then you might be working on projects like podcasts and writing books and things like that. And a consciousness will step in and help you. They are angels, definitely, that work with you. Depends on how high the energy is of the guide, which dimension, and how high the frequency is. Spirit guides is such a massive topic. I could honestly speak about this.
That could be a whole episode, right? Okay, cool. Absolutely. Well, one more question on that, because I know we move on to some other things, but would one good way just for people to kind of start, and I'd be interested offline, and maybe I'll chat with you about a reading. I'd like to do a spirit guide reading with you, but could you just simply, because some people don't really understand, how do you talk to these people, these imaginary things you've never seen, just, hi, I believe in you, I want to start a relationship with you, and just kind of starting to talk, because isn't the first step just believing in it in your heart?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think the awareness that you have, Lauren, of a guide, and some of your listeners will have as well, is a sign that they're around you. And they're maybe starting to come to you in dream state, or your knowing is there, which is claircognizant. Claircognizant's a French word, which means clear knowing. And you start having a knowing that this is guide that's trying to get in touch with you. Okay. And then you start to go and see a psychic medium, and you say, what guides are around me? And they start to explain there's 5 guides and one stepping forward, because they can see, feel, perceive, know the guides around you. That's how a psychic medium is an intermediary, the bridge maker between this reality and other realities. So it's great to go to psychic mediums when you're having your awakening, because they'll hold the energy to help you start connecting with your guides. It's like learning to walk, right? Or learning to ride a bike. You kind of don't do that on your own. You have people around you. And then using a guided meditation every morning, and you start to ask a question. In a guided meditation, I take my students up to a high dimension. They meet the guide, and we start to have a dialogue. You might just see light at the beginning. You might just feel. And then when you come out of that space of sacred silence, that sacred connection, we just start to journal write together as a group. And what comes through, they find when they move into surrender and trust, is a lot of information, a lot of guidance is there.
That's really cool. Okay. So kind of a segue a little bit, because it can go into the rest of our conversation with, intertwining spirituality into the corporate world or your business, your career. But also just because intuition is everything, right? That can go into any facet of life. So would sometimes guides or consciousness or source energy or whatever come through, like you said, I think you said something like just this knowing, because we think it's just our brain sometimes, right? Just thinking a thought, which I could right now just say oh, I'm looking outside. It's a nice day. That's a thought that I'm just having. But some things that might be coming through about things like gut feelings or whatever it might be, a loving feeling or whatever, that could also be coming through, right? Through A divine potential.
Yeah, divine. Yeah, loving the gut feeling is one of the strongest things. So feeling is clairsentient, clear feeling. You can't ignore a clear feeling. You can't ignore your gut. It's very hard to.
Yeah.
And you feel very off-centered when you go against your gut feeling, don't you? Your gut's telling you. And so I've heard so many people say to me, my gut was telling me this and I ignored it and I regretted it.
Yeah.
Right? So when people say to me, does everyone have psychic abilities? I'm like, everyone's had a gut feeling.
Yep.
Everyone's had a clear knowing. Everyone's had this burst of, I just feel like I've got to say this to you feeling, right? That's the throat opening up and clear audience working, clear hearing.
Okay.
So all the psychic senses are always there. It's just, are we slowing down our life into a place of receptivity? Okay. But I'm glad you asked this, Lauren, because receiving signs is also one of the first parts of the spiritual awakening process. Yep. So we're not always able to tune into our body, but we can tune into signs around us.
Right. That's easiest, maybe the first step, right? Angel numbers, sometimes repetitiveness with like animals or the same dream or whatever. People see feathers or like, whatever it might be in your life, right? That's I've talked about that. Okay, that's a good one to remind people of, just to start paying attention to, because I think there's people like us that know about all these different terminologies, but some people are like, this is all new. So I think that's something for people that might doubt or they're not quite awakening yet to certain things. That's an easy first step, is just noticing signs in your life, right?
Really easy, and it's spiritual law, universal law to ask for a sign and you'll receive it, right? So your daily morning practice, just say, I'd like to receive a sign of confirmation. Do I take this job? I want to see a sign of confirmation. Do I go on a third date with this guy? Okay. Like, you can use it for your life. Sure. Use it for my life all the time. Yeah. And then it's a positive sign, looks like this.
Okay.
A red heart. A negative sign is a black cross, or a positive sign is like a hawk or a bird or a little sparrow. And you might think, oh, I see that often. So I teach my students in my sign course, ask for it in duplicate, triplicate. Ask for the signs to be repeated.
Then you can't doubt it.
So ask for the signs to come to you in such a way that it's unexpected. Okay. And then you say to the universe, if I missed a sign, please show it to me again. Remember, you're in the driver's seat with spirituality and with spirit guides. They're here desperate to help you, to help you evolve, right? So you just got to ask.
That's what I've heard. Like, they want to be acknowledged. They want to like be in communication with you. Yeah. Okay. That's a really good tip. Okay. So the first could be signs, and then this all knowing, just this feeling, just feels so true and so knowing. It's your gut, it's your intuition. Like, we all have that.
We all have it. And then another one, which I love talking about and teaching, is the word clédon. So this is a beautiful word. It's a French word, and it's when a message is spoken to you unconsciously from somebody. Okay. So it's like when somebody says to you, Lauren, I just feel like I've got to say to you to keep going with this podcast, or start writing a book. Or someone's consciousness shift, they don't realize, but they're giving you guidance. Or it might be a song on the radio when you're going through heartbreak, and you turn on the radio. It's not normally to that radio station, and you hear this song that you'll get through this. So a clédon is when a message is delivered to you externally through sound, and it feels like the message, and this is the clincher, it feels like it's delivered right just for you in that moment.
Okay.
And you have this feeling, Lauren, of going, I needed to hear that.
Yeah.
That's for me. I needed to hear that. And you get kind of excited when you hear it.
Sure.
That's a beautiful way to receive a sign. It's not through sight, it's through sound. And when you hear the words, you can feel it in your belly, in your heart. You have this moment of actually feeling a little special, like, oh, wow, thank you.
Yeah. Ooh, I love all this. Well, thank you. And thank you for making it so, it just seems so easy and so clear from you. Because I do think I like all the woo-woo stuff, and I can go way deep down a rabbit hole. But for a lot of people that may be like not sure about this kind of stuff, this is an easy way to understand it. So thank you for making it kind of just like easy, simple. We all have the ability to receive this. So I love that. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. We all do. I'm passionate about teaching it. I think I've struggled for so long.
Yeah.
I suffer from depression and anxiety. Okay. This is a long time ago, before podcasts were available and all the resources. So I think people that had spiritual awakenings even a long time ago, it felt really lonely and really confusing.
Totally.
And you had to study out of books, and I sat alone in my apartment reading books and just trying to figure it out. And so now with so much resources available, I feel passionate about sharing these teachings.
Yeah, and I can see the passion. I love it. And you're right. It's starting to really come out a lot more now, which is really cool. Yeah. And you can really see the awakening happening. So I love it. Okay, so let's move into that intuition that everyone has. How do we use this? Because of course we can all do it on our own, right? You're reading a book by yourself, talking to people on podcasts, or going to your medium, whatever. But how do we use this in the real world? How do we use this in the corporate world, in our careers? Because that's one thing. I talk to this stuff about my friends, my family, but I don't really bring this into the workplace. How do you do that without people thinking you're crazy?
Okay, so the first thing is, and I've noticed this in the corporate world recently, a lot of people are having spiritual awakenings in the corporate world. Okay. So the first thing is be brave and start, my book's called Brave, because if someone's brave enough to start talking about it, you'll find everyone's kind of into it.
Okay.
Kind of keen to know more about it. So I have crystals on my desk at work. Okay. I'd say intentions before we started a meeting, like an intention of clarity. I would, before a board meeting, I'd go into a room and I'd sit silently and write what I felt was really important that needed to be spoken about in a board meeting. Or I'd ask my guides, is there anything in my blind spot that I need to address that would come up? So you need to create some sacred silence during your corporate work day and just connect with guides.
Okay.
And we don't. We're just going from meeting to meeting, to Zoom to coffees to talking. And it's like we don't really create that sacred bit of silence. And I think a lot of corporations now actually creating little pod spaces you can sit alone. So get your journal out. And, when you use your intuition and connect with your guides during your workday, you're more efficient, you make less mistakes, you communicate in a more loving way with more integrity in your word. I mean, these are very useful things to have as you become a senior leader.
Totally.
These are essential skills.
Yeah, that's good advice. And I think, for some reason, it just feels like sometimes there's this like separation, right? Like spirituality, religion, work, it doesn't go together. But like you said, you can totally intermesh those. And I don't know, there can be a lot of negativity sometimes in the workplace, right? Competition, it's all about money, pressure, deadlines, judging, whatever. And so I think it's really important to bring that good energy in.
It's important to bring the good energy in. If you're in a bit of a toxic environment at work, and I teach this when I teach, the two things I teach up front with spirituality is connecting to your spirit guides, and I teach protection. We have to understand there's dark and light in the world, right? And the dark at a very basic level can be just negative thought forms or projections of negative thoughts to you. And when you have your awakening, everyone wants to open up. Everyone talks about opening up, right? When you open up, you're also opening up to people's beliefs and negative thought forms that don't belong with you. And if you're highly empathic and feel great compassion to save people and heal people, which sometimes can lack boundaries, but if you want to go down that way, you take on things that aren't your own. So I bring in Archangel Michael into meetings. Right? I will say to myself at the end of a work day. And I used to do that because I used to go straight from my corporate job to doing readings. I did my corporate job and appeared on psychic TV at the same time. Wow. Like I was doing readings on television show, at the same time. So I had to really manage my energy, even when I'm in a meeting and I'm feeling pressure, I'm feeling unpleasant thoughts around me, I'll run light through my central column and over my auric field, and I'll just start extending a green light out of my heart. This may sound like very basic or even maybe silly kind of ideas, but if we start to study energy and how powerful we are individually, and to have intention of like sending out energy from a heart space, once you start seeing what happens when you do that, you won't stop doing it.
Yeah,
you'll get it.
That's true. It's addictive in a good way, because I've been doing that a lot more too. Like I would start mostly with myself. That's what we kind of do, right? One, it's the ego, and two, we're just us. Like we're trying to protect our energy first, and then we can extend to others. But that's how I learned a lot, like protecting myself in light, like no matter what it's for, protecting your energy. But now I've been trying to really challenge myself to think about doing that for other people and extending it outward. So I like your advice, because that can be contagious in like workplace or wherever you are.
Yeah. And as light workers, Lauren, which is, yourself and myself and many of your listeners, our job is to increase our ability to hold light. And this is not an easy path. That's why it's so important. I wrote a beautiful chapter in this book. It's about Soul Tribe, the courage to find your tribe. because you'll need more and more energetic and spiritual and heart-based support around you from women that are not competing with you, collaborating, you know, holding you when you're in shame or you're going through a bit of a growth in your soul. And it's so important during this process, probably to make new friends, to lean into new connections when you're doing workshops and you're doing yoga retreats, and just go, hey, like, I think we've got a lot in common. Do you want to connect? Because leaving the old world behind might mean leaving behind old friends, old work colleagues.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, you might be quitting your job, right? You're going to need support through this big stuff.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. And as I always talk about, just the more positive energy we have, the more we're going to grow and move into this awakening, this new paradigm, the new earth, all those, you know, terminologies that are being spoken about. So that's a good point. I'm glad we talked about that. Okay. So you've talked about a few things that you've written in the book, but what else is the book about, Brave?
So I take the reader on a path I called the courageous path. And it's the path of being asleep to being partially awake to being fully awake. Okay, if we use spiritual words, it's the path to coming back to yourself. Because Lauren, you know, for me, I self-sacrificed myself and I was a perfectionist. So there's a really interesting story I have at the beginning of this book where, do you remember the book 50 Shades of Grey?
Yes.
I think everyone remembers 50 Shades of Grey.
Yeah.
Did you read 50 Shades of Grey? You don't say yes.
You know what? I think I read, was there 3? I think I read 2 and then I was like, I can't do this anymore. It was years ago. And I think I watched one of the movies, but you know, yeah.
Right. So we don't think of 50 Shades of Grey and spirituality in the same sentence, but I'm going to share with you a story. So I was working at a big publishing house that was responsible for publishing this book. It was a fantastic time. I was a perfectionist and getting things right was really important for who I was, right? So I worked alongside a team and I was responsible for stock management, an element of reordering the stocks. I was an accountant and an analyst, and the sales were climbing higher and higher. As you remember, we just didn't know where it was going to tip. Everyone was reading it. Women that were not readers were reading this book. So because we're in Australia, we're so far away, we had to allow 2 months to get the books overseas locally.
Okay.
And so I had to work alongside and forecast the sales. So I forecasted a sizable quantity that we needed and we put it on a ship, and everyone was like, are you sure? I said, I think it's going to still run for another 2-3 more months. Anyway, the stock was on the ship. It was a sizable quantity. A lot of money was spent. And a week later, I got the Nielsen data, scan data that tells you the trajectory of the sales. And I remember this Friday morning opening up the data and opening up the Excel report. And I just remember as I stared at this number on the screen, my heart just sank into my stomach. And I just looked at it and I thought, what? And basically the sales had kind of stopped, like a tap had been turned off. And I remember just thinking, oh my God, I've made the biggest mistake. And so I had this expensive stock order. And I say the word I because it wasn't me. Of course, I was part of a company and a board that had made the decision. But when you're a perfectionist, as I was, and a people pleaser and so disconnected from who I was, I made it all about me.
Yeah.
So I took on the error, I took on the shame. And so in the days and weeks that followed was a lot of shame. So my book starts with that feeling of what happens when things start to break in your life, when things start to go wrong.
Yeah.
So a lot of our spiritual awakenings start with mistakes, divorces, bankruptcy, kids leaving the home, big changes, big transitions. Then I take people on a path from the kind of mistakes, the lost feeling, into what it's like to look at signs of synchronicity in your life, what it's like to survive and get through a dark night of courage. Dark Night of Courage is my favorite chapter, and a lot of people like it because there's always this one time, I don't know, Lauren, you probably have had it and shared it, but it's called the Dark Night of the Soul is the common term, but I call it the Dark Night of Courage because it takes courage to get through it and really thrive on the other side.
Yeah.
And I've interviewed 19 women in this book, and they share their stories of how they've overcome adversity and thrived. And every single one of them has stepped into their purpose, into their calling.
Yeah.
That's really that's what it's about.
Okay. I love it. I'm going to have to read this. This sounds good. Totally. I haven't had anything like crazy traumatic, but I did have a time after college where I felt like I just had this like 2-week depression, and I'm not one to like feel that way usually. And I just felt, what is my purpose? I'd just broken up with a boyfriend. I didn't like my job, like everything. I was just kind of feeling like what's going on? And I read the book A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle, and that was my awakening. And I feel like I had to go through that time to really like reevaluate. And yeah, there is something to going through like a lull or a hard time or like a change that like snaps you into an awakening. It is amazing.
I quoted Eckhart Tolle in my book, and I tell you, Lauren, when I saw my book on a bookshelf next to Eckhart Tolle in a bookstore in Australia,
cool.
I had to myself.
Yeah.
So
That's really cool.
It was one of those books that changed my life years ago. And I think Eckhart Tolle says, it's like he describes it's a nightmare that will wake you up from your sleep state, and kind of boredom and apathy. I'm not quoting it exactly, but boredom and apathy won't awaken you.
That's true.
It is the nightmare that will awaken you, right? And that is our dark night.
Yep.
And the more attached we are to the life that we believe we need to have, the darker the night. So my dark night happened many years after that 50 Shades of Grey incident, because I kind of went back to sleep.
Yeah.
Partially sleep. So I had a job loss, my apartment flooded, I broke up with a guy, and I broke my foot all in the space of weeks.
Yeah.
And I just come back from the Arthur Findlay College, where I discovered and studied to be a medium. And there was this moment where I couldn't go back to sleep. It was like, I meant to do this thing. I meant to be a medium. I meant to honor my spiritual nature. And I came from a family, and I have a loving, beautiful connection with my family. It's just, I knew this value that I was starting to hold was at odds with the values in my family and culture and larger society. Right. And I had this real oh no feeling of, I don't know how to honor myself. So the dark night teaches you to honor yourself.
Yeah.
Because the calling you'll find when you honor yourself.
Yes, totally. That makes sense. And I also think like oftentimes the dark night, often, not always, but there's something you were attached to that's taken away. And that's a big thing is, you're a human here learning to not be too attached to things, which is very hard to do because we're in this physical place and it feels like it's all there is. And if you lose it, you're not okay. But that's a huge thing to work on in your spiritual journey is non-attachment, right? But yeah, it often feels like you said, like when you lose someone usually or something, that's a big blow to your life, right? So, attachment usually has a play, I feel like, in a dark night. And do you think? Go ahead.
Yeah. No. I love you saying. I think the more attached we are, the darker the night.
It's so hard. But do you think some of these things are like predestined to happen to wake us up, or do things just kind of? I know this kind of goes into that question. Like, is it free will, or was it like destiny? Did it just happen? What are your thoughts on that? I know it could be different, maybe for each person, but.
Yeah, that's a really insightful question, Lauren. Free will is the overarching ideal and law on earth, right? So we're here as souls to grow. So fundamentally, free will is always at play. You'll find free will be a wonderful thing to experience when you connect to your intuition. Yeah. But so often we don't. So we don't really exercise free will for our higher self. We just buy into the values and belief sets of family around us, right, and that we're given to. I come from a family of engineer. You've got to be an engineer, even though you're like, I don't want to be an engineer. Sure. I want to be a veterinarian, whatever it might be. So we disconnect. So if you use free will, you'd be the veterinarian.
Yeah.
You do something different, but we don't. And so when I read for clients, I can see when they're using their free will and they're really connected to themselves. And I can see when they're not, and I just help them because my intentions of my reading is transformation. So I'll help them to get unstuck. And I say, I can see that you're buying into a life that isn't quite your own, or you yourself are feeling conflicted. So quite often psychic mediums are not giving clients anything that radical. It tends to be bubbling underneath the surface. So I think I've answered that in a roundabout way.
No, totally. They're in a way like your earthly guide, not your spirit guide, but there's someone here guiding you. Okay, so that makes sense. And then also just as far as understanding events in your life, though, like a breakup or someone passes away that's close to you, do you think sometimes that stuff can just happen, but also do you think that might have been in a contract that you had signed up for in a way to be here and go through that?
Yeah. Great question, because I think some people are going through stuff. I've done a couple of readings for actually some beautiful people in the US in the last week where there was sudden death. Mm-hmm. And I get quite strongly this was a contract. Yeah. And the contract was to have beautiful love. And the contract was that it had to end at this particular point. And I think on some level as a psychic medium, when you bring through that guidance for the client or you yourself feel it or get told it, it's like it's a relief. It's like, okay, I can somehow make peace and move with this. I think death is always in a contract, right? That's a big
event.
Yeah. It's not something that's very profound. Yeah. I think when the death of jobs, death of things that can feel like a real death. Yeah. Okay. I know I took a job. The universe told me not to take the job. I got an absolute clear sign. After the 4th round of interviews, I got a clear sign from the universe. My handbag, my Michael Kors handbag, brand new, snapped. The handle snapped. And I had this feeling rush through my body, don't take the job. But my ego was attached to it. I took the job and I regretted taking the job for every day for the full 10 months I was there. In the end, they let me go. So to answer your question, I didn't exercise my free will up front. The universe had to help me. Yep. And I got fired from that job. And that was a horrible experience to go through. And it was a relief when it happened. So I thought I didn't want to be here. Yeah. Right. So the universe will do the thing. So that wasn't in a contract, but they were like, you shouldn't have been here.
Sure.
You should have started your spiritual business a year ago. We're gonna make this happen really fast now. Wow. So that kind of thing is I wasn't honoring myself.
Yep. Wow. That's crazy. That's cool. The snap of the bag.
I write about that story in the book, and in my signs and synchronicity chapter, I got so many little anecdotes of how people have received signs. Yeah. And my little story was when I didn't take the sign, but every other story is when everyone honored the sign and just the magic that opened up in their life. And that's you. If you really open your eyes, the universe is helping you.
Yeah, and it is crazy because again, in our ego human mind, we're just like, I don't know. Like I was actually told by a psychic years ago that you're going to start doing stuff on YouTube, and I'm like, I don't think so. Like I'm into like fashion and tech, and no, I mean I was into spirituality, but here I am now doing things on YouTube. Like. Yep. Listen to the stuff coming through,
Absolutely. I got told in 2015 I'd write a book and then it'd be published around the world, and I'd be traveling around the world speaking about it and running retreats. And I thought I was well embedded in my corporate job, and I thought, I don't know what you're talking about. And back then I actually thought it was a bad reading. I was like, this lady has no idea. It was probably one of the most accurate readings I had. Everything she said really came to light, right?
The good news is oftentimes you'll catch up with that stuff. It's waiting for you, right? It's just, it takes time for us to continue to wake up, and the universe, I think, does really want to support us. So that's the cool thing. It is always there waiting for you.
Absolutely. And in my Dark Night chapter, I write, we feel like we're abandoned in our dark night. We feel like the universe doesn't have our back. Yeah. We feel like we're singled out and being punished. We're really being saved from our small life. Yeah. We're being saved from being off track from our ultimate destiny.
That's true.
There is a greater love that is there for you.
Yep. That's true.
The thing that maybe you're in has to end.
Right.
And you may have to go through an acute amount of pain for a short time, but you also will be supported through the heartbreak.
Yep.
And then in this greater love that the universe wants you to have there. I do a lot of readings for women in relationships that are going through heartbreak or just questioning, and I really have to support them to show them that they deserve more, and the universe is showing them
totally
they deserve.
Yeah, I agree with that. And also, maybe also like redirecting you to help other people now that you've gone through that, right?
Yeah. I mean, as light workers, Lauren, you and I, we've got to walk the walk first.
Sure.
Really learn all the lessons. Light workers, for any light workers out there, hang in there. You've got to learn the lessons first.
Yeah.
You've got to learn them on an amplified way, 2x, 3 times. Might have to be a bit more painful because you've got to hold bigger space, right? You have to go a bit deeper into your dark night so you really get the wisdom. Then you've got to find a way to bring it through in like a really practical way. You'll be called to write a book, do a podcast, set up a website, teach it. So you'll also have to find a way to create a business or some sort of structure around it, so you can make sense of everything you've been through.
Totally.
So there's steps you got to go through.
Yeah, that's true. Wow. I love it. This is kind of segueing, just because I want to make sure we touch on this. I've been asking everybody this. It's like my new question that I ask everybody, just because I want everyone's different perspective, especially you as a light worker and having the intuitive gifts that come through to you, just with what's going on in the world right now. I think it's an awakening. I think all the chaos is coming out so that we can heal as a world. Do you have anything that you would like to share with everybody? Like you said, like hang in there, because it feels like it's bad. It feels like it's negative. It feels like we're going backwards. But I think we're actually moving forward. What do you have to say about all this stuff going on?
It's the great spiritual awakening, and we'll always remember this time as a very important time on the planet. And when COVID first hit, I did actually do a meditation with my own guides, and I said, what's going on? And they said, there'll be miracles at the end of this. They didn't say when it was going to end. I didn't ask. They said, there'll be miracles. So, Lauren, we've all had to connect with ourselves during this time. Yep. So many of us have lost jobs. We've had to sit in silence alone, disconnected from family, because we literally can't travel or fly or drive and see them. So connection to self has had to happen. We've had to reassess what we're attached to in life, right? And the things that we don't want to be attached to anymore. Are we attached to commuting long hours to a job that we don't even like? Right. So that all stopped for us to look at our life and go, do you like this? Do you like what you were doing before? And so we're all going to go back to a new, much more awakened, slower, considered version of ourselves. I'm here in Sydney right now, and we're just emerging from 4 months of lockdown, and we're allowed recently to gather in small groups of 5. It's been beautiful walking past parks and seeing small groups of people sit, not on their gadgets, not on their phones, and having conversations. Little picnics, not in restaurants, like homemade food, right? And it's this return to a simpler life. Yeah. And from that, we build a new life, right? And it is going to be more in connection with who we are, like our authentic life, connection to our children, slowing down and working on our marriage, slowing down and saying, well, I want to work, but not that hard, not as hard as I used to work. So, and during this space of lockdown, we've reached for meditation tools, new teachers, right? We might have had to have counseling, and, old trauma might have surfaced. So we might have worked on old traumas that needed to be addressed. So to answer your question, 100%, this is an awakening. And if you use it like it's an awakening, if you squeeze the juice out of this time, instead of wanting your old life or wanting to be out there at a party, or if you just go, this is what's offered to me now and I'm going to make the best of it, that's when you'll flourish, when this is over. Oh,
I like that. Yeah, because this is the reality. So yeah, I agree. I was going to say it's like bringing it back to what we were talking about. It's like the dark night of the collective, right? It's not just one singular. It's in our lifetimes, we've never gone through something where everyone is experiencing this trauma and this change. And I think a lot can come out of this.
And we're so much more empathetic as people. And how disconnected were we from each other and each other's problems?
Yeah.
We compared and contrasted ourselves individually a lot to other people. They had more than me and I want what they have. That comparison mentality. We've all had to suffer, definitely in different ways, but on a very global way. We've had to suffer. And our empathy stores, and I think there'll be some beautiful PhDs that come out of this time in the years to come, like a lot of research will be showing the way our access to happiness is a lot more easier now. After COVID, because we've had to find a way to be happy watching Netflix and Uber Eats and finding happiness in phone calls and Zoom calls with family.
Sure.
Right? So we know how to do that now. That's a great gift.
That's true. Yeah. I mean, this podcast was birthed in the earlier, February 2020, or no, February 2021, sorry, this year. But yeah, you find other ways, you get new hobbies, things come through. There's a lot of beauty coming out of this and a lot of growth. And I think we aren't going to go back to just the normal way. And I think that's a good thing.
I think that's absolutely a good thing. And if you're going through this and you're still confused, lean into a mentor, a coach, a counselor, a spiritual teacher. So I've definitely used all my resources around me. women and men that had more wisdom than myself during this process. Don't do this alone.
Mm-hmm.
And that tribe of teachers will also accelerate your growth, your spiritual growth, your emotional growth, your resilience. Don't try and do this on your own, because for me, a lot of things were in my blind spot for many years. And so I needed teachers and books, podcasts and things to take it out of my blind spot, to put it in front of my face for me to look at, how do I change my life?
Definitely.
How do I live differently? So you need guidance with that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And the beauty is there's more time in some ways now to do that, to listen to podcasts, read books, meditate. You can do Zoom psychic sessions, and it's a time to reflect and slow down, right? So I think it's actually a gift. It's uncomfortable at first, but I feel like I'm starting to get into the groove of this. And, you know, I'm like, now if I have like more than one thing in one day, I'm like, dude, this is like too much. But I
can't cope. I like to focus on one thing and do it well now.
Yeah, totally. I love it. This has all been so good. Is there anything else that you want to add before we kind of wrap up? Is there anything coming through, or just any words of wisdom just to kind of give to people?
I want to just finish with, quite often we think of bravery in the larger sense, rescuing someone from a fire or from drowning or something like that. We don't think of bravery in the smaller sense, to be who we want to be in the world, maybe to leave the marriage, even though everyone's like that. We don't do that in our family, or we don't quit our job, or you've studied too hard to get here. Yet everything in your body is, this doesn't serve me anymore. So my last, takeaway is, be brave to live your life in accordance with your values, right? In accordance with who you want to be eventually.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's a 3 or a 5 year plan, but if you make the change today, you're going to get there sooner than you think. The universe will have your back, your guides, your ancestors around you. We'll make sure it happens.
Oh, I love it. That's awesome. Be true to your true authentic self, right?
Yeah, perfectly said, Lauren.
I love it. Okay, well, we need to tell people where they can find you. Obviously, we can find your book, Brave. Where is that sold? Can we find it on
Amazon.com.
Okay,
it's in bookstores in the US.
Okay.
You can reach me at SheilaV.co. Private message me on Instagram or connect with me on Facebook. I love getting messages from my readers. I get a couple of messages every week from readers telling me how the book's changed their life. And it means a lot. I love getting into the dialogue and even continuing the dialogue with the reader after the book's ended.
Yeah.
You can reach out, have a reading with me if you want to learn more about your own guides or what your calling is. It's 2 things I love speaking about.
I love it. Well, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for all the work that you're doing in the world, Sheila.
Thank you, Lauren. Right back at you.
I love it. You guys, thanks for listening today. I hope you feel inspired. I know I do. Sheila's energy is contagious. You can catch me on Instagram at RealLaurenLive, and you can catch me on my website, Lauren.live. We're going to link all the stuff. We'll link the book, Brave. We're going to link, the Instagram handles for Sheila so you can find her and follow up. Thanks, guys.